Worry has a strange way of sneaking into our minds, doesn't it? It starts as a small thought, then it grows, and before we know it, we're carrying a massive weight on our shoulders. We try to fix everything, predict the future, find a solution for every problem. But the truth, we don't always have control over what happens, and that's terrifying. Maybe right now, you're worried about something. A bill that needs to be paid, a problem at work, an unexpected diagnosis, a relationship that feels like it's falling apart. Worry arrives uninvited and takes up all the space in our minds. But what if there was another way? What if, instead of carrying this weight alone, there was a place to lay it down? Because God never asked us to hold everything by ourselves. On the contrary, He invites us to let go, to trust. But how do we actually do that? Worry can be silent, but it carries a weight that exhausts us. Do you feel it? We wake up in the middle of the night with our minds spinning, trying to predict the future, trying to solve everything before it even happens. And the more we try, the more exhausted we become. I remember a friend who experienced this intensely. His son became seriously ill. Not something minor, but something life-threatening. He spent days and nights in the hospital, waiting for test results, listening to diagnoses, trying to stay strong. But inside, he was breaking apart. The fear of what might happen was unbearable. How could he rest when his child was fighting for his life? How could he trust God when everything seemed so uncertain? And I understand. Because when we're in the middle of a storm, worry feels inevitable. It feels like if we stop worrying, we're failing, as if worrying is the only thing we can do. But is that really true? There's a passage in the Bible that always makes me reflect on this. Jesus was visiting the home of Martha and Mary. Martha was busy, worried, running around, making sure everything was in order to host him. Mary, on the other hand, simply sat at Jesus' feet, listening to his words. Frustrated, Martha asked Jesus to tell Mary to help her, but Jesus responded with something that Martha probably didn't expect. Martha, Martha, you are worried and upset about many things, but only one thing is necessary. Luke 10:41-42. Do you see it? Martha was so focused on handling everything, so caught up in her tasks, that she missed the most important thing: Jesus' presence. And how often do we do the same? We get busy, overwhelmed, trying to hold everything together, and in the process, we forget to stop. We forget to rest in God. It's difficult, I know, because resting feels irresponsible when there's so much to do. But there's a difference between being responsible and being consumed by worry. Worry steals our peace. It shifts our focus to what we can't control, to what could go wrong, to what we lack. But when we trust God, something changes. That doesn't mean the problems disappear. My friend's son still needed treatment. There were still difficult nights. But he told me something I will never forget. The first night I truly surrendered the situation to God was the first night I was able to sleep. Because trusting doesn't mean pretending the problem doesn't exist. It means knowing you don't have to carry it alone. So today, I ask you, what is stealing your peace? What has been weighing on your heart, keeping you restless? And could you start letting go? Even just a little, because God never asked us to carry heavy burdens. On the contrary, He invites us to rest. But I know, letting go isn't easy. We cling to our worries because, in some way, we believe that if we stop worrying, something will go wrong. As if worry were a shield, a way to try to control what happens. But does it really work? Has worrying ever prevented something bad from happening? Has it ever solved a problem before it even existed? Jesus knew it didn't. That's why He left us with a reminder that is so simple, yet so powerful. Can any one of you by worrying add a single hour to your life? Matthew 6:27. Worry doesn't add anything to our lives. In fact, it takes away. It steals our sleep, our peace, our joy. It leaves us tense, exhausted, overwhelmed. And maybe what God is telling you today is exactly this. My child, let go of this burden. I never intended for you to carry it alone. Think about the moment when the disciples were in the boat. They were caught in a violent storm, watching the waves rise, the wind roar. Panic took over, but Jesus was sleeping. They woke him up in desperation. Teacher, don't you care if we drown? And Jesus stood up, looked at the raging sea and commanded, Quiet, be still. Mark 4:39. And in an instant, everything was calm. Maybe that's what God wants to do in your life right now, to calm the storm inside you. But for that to happen, you need to let go of control, to trust, to rest. So let me ask you, what is keeping you up at night? What is weighing heavy on your heart? Maybe today is the day to place it in God's hands and let Him calm the waves. Maybe right now you're wondering, but how do I let go of this weight? How do I rest in God when everything inside me is restless? I've asked myself that question so many times, because in practice, resting in God doesn't mean the problems disappear. They're still there. The bills still need to be paid. The answers we're waiting for still haven't come. The uncertainties still exist. But resting in God doesn't mean everything around us has to be resolved. It means that even in the middle of the chaos, we can find peace. Once, someone gave me advice that stuck with me. They said, when your mind is full of worries, try something simple. Stop and take a deep breath. In the silence, give to God what is weighing you down. Don't try to solve everything in your mind. Just say, Lord, this is too heavy for me, so I surrender it to you. I didn't think something so small could make a difference until I tried it. At that moment, I realized that the problem wasn't just what was happening around me, but the noise inside me. And when I stopped, breathed, and surrendered, a sense of relief washed over me. Not because everything was suddenly fixed, but because I remembered that I wasn't alone. Maybe you can try that right now. Breathe. Let go of the weight, even if just for a moment. And if you want, write it down. Grab a piece of paper and list your worries. Then, next to each one, write, This is not in my hands, but in God's hands. This won't erase your problems, but it might change the way you carry them. Because God never asked us to bear them alone. He invites us to trust. If there's one thing I've learned in life, it's that worry steals precious moments. It traps us in a future that hasn't arrived yet and makes us forget that God is already there, taking care of everything. But I know, saying don't worry is easy. The hard part is quieting the mind, calming the heart, and trusting. But trusting doesn't mean ignoring reality. It means choosing where to place our focus. Have you noticed that the more you fixate on a problem, the bigger it seems? When we feed anxiety, it only grows. But when we choose to look at God, something changes. Not because the difficulties disappear, but because we remember who is in control. Corrie ten Boom, a woman who survived the Holocaust, wrote something that deeply impacted me. Never be afraid to trust an unknown future to a known God. Because, in the end, that's what it comes down to. The future may seem uncertain, but God never changes. What scares us, He already sees in full. So, maybe today is about resting a little more, about releasing what is beyond your control and placing it in His hands. Breathe. Remember that God never asked you to carry this weight alone. And when your mind tries to pull you back into anxiety, remind yourself, God is already taking care of this. As Jesus reminded us in Matthew 11:28-30, Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. May this promise be your refuge today. May you find rest, not because everything is resolved, but because God is holding you.